Welcome everyone to the NHTSA V3 implementation call. Today is March 24th. We appreciate you being with us this morning. As a reminder, we do record these calls so that you have the ability to watch them or refer back to them afterwards. They are posted on our website and also on our YouTube channel. And it usually takes us about a day to get those processed and posted. So if you miss a meeting or if you want to refer back to a section that got overly complicated or lots of conversation happened and you want to refer back, then those are available to you on our website and our YouTube channel. As a reminder, we do encourage conversation as we go through the agenda and the topics. If you have questions, concerns, or issues, feel free to unmute your microphone or to use the chat feature. We will watch both of those and make sure you have an opportunity to ask your questions and have those answered. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump into the agenda. Laurel is going to start us off this morning with a maintenance update.
Good morning, everyone. So as some states and vendors might have noticed, we have been experiencing a slower than usual initial processing time on submissions sent to the NHTSA SAC. Specifically, records sent have been staying at the status code 0 or awaiting processing for as long as a couple of days. This is due in part to some large batches of records we recently received from several states. And as we work through those records this week, please feel free to increase the duration between your retrieve status requests on individual submissions, as you may continue to see a status code 0 for a couple of days after submission. We would also ask, as always, that you refrain from submitting records that have a status code, resubmitting records that have a status code of 0. That we will process all records we receive. It's just not quite as fast as usual right now. So if it has a 0, just give it some more time and no need to resubmit unless you receive an error code. Any questions? Great. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can always send me an email and I'll get back to you with an answer as soon as I can. Thanks.
Thanks, Laurel. Would you throw your email address up in the chat for anybody who hasn't reached out to you before? Perfect. Thank you. I'd like to invite our ET3 guests, John and Neil. If you've got some updates, we would love to hear about your updates on ET3.
Thanks, Julianne. I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen real quick. Give me 1 second. All right. Okay, so let me just jump into a couple of updates and then we can field any questions that we have. So from a onboarding perspective, we're clipping along at a reasonably good pace. Sorry about the slides. Hold on, let me get this back. Okay. And basically our statistics are right around 57 users who have successfully been approved for the key requester role. So, that's a good number. We're not over the 50% yet, so we're anxious to see more come in and get that key so that they can give us the PCRs that we're looking to have transmitted. From a count of PCRs, it's about 462 K, 463, right around in that range. This is as of today. And we have roughly about 27 active submitters that are consistently giving us the PCR records on a daily basis. So that kind of gives you a sense of where we are from an onboarding perspective as well as submission perspective. Obviously, we want to get these numbers up. So we're going to talk about some ideas in the future, near future, where we can again get folks onboarded in a quicker pace. I do have some other good news to also let folks know about. We have a change that will allow for 180 days to be used as the measure for when the keys need to be renewed. Some of you may remember we had a 60-day rule, and we've gotten approval from the security folks that we can up that to 180 days. So we're putting the code into place such that the 27 active keys that we currently have in production, they now would be extended to 180 days. And obviously, if you get new keys, that will eventually fall under that same rule. There's about 10, less than 10, I'd say, that expire by the end of, or sometime this month. So we've identified those 10, and there'll be some level of outreach, if you will, that will, allow for us to make sure that those keys get extended such that we don't have to stop the flow of PCR data that's coming in. So that's good news. I just want to, as a reminder, we are still on the 60-day extension. So April 30th is the date that we're expecting to get the PCR records that's captured for January, February, and March, and then historical records that span from March 2019 to February 2020. So that is still in effect, and it is a reminder. In terms of technical issues, yeah, we've pretty much not seen any more 3.4 PCRs coming in, so that's great. Just as a reminder, it has to be 3.4 right now. So 3.5 is something we can look to later this year. And then making sure you have the right organization name value that's in the SOAP message, as well as those de-agency fields, de-agency 1, 2, and 4. Those values need to be correct as well. And I think a lot of you, if not all of you, may have received the crosswalk from the TAC folks from Clay's group. So in there were the actual values that are associated with each participant as it relates to the state ID unique number as well as the agency unique number. So those are very important that we use those exact values when we're sending our PCR records. I just want to cover one more thing, which is very important. We've seen some activity recently that we're going to have to put some fixes in. Currently, when you look at the roll requests, there's different ways that we can go about submitting a roll request. We certainly can submit one for the keys. That's called a API key requester roll. And then there's the ET3 model participant role. And typically, if you request both of those roles, you're going to end up, when you go into ET3, with some tiles that look like this. So there'll be 2 tiles that'll show up. One of the things that we've come across is that there's a little glitch that we're going to have to fix, whereby only one person can really request a particular type of role at a time. So what that means is that we are going to have to ask that if you are going to request both of these applications, the CDX as well as the ET3, that you use another person to do the request for the second role that you're going to be requesting. So what that means is that one particular user can request the key requester role, and a second user would request the ET3 model participant role. This is something that, again, we're going to use as a temporary workaround until we get the fix in, and then that will go away. But currently, we're finding where folks that have tiles that have both of them like this, we're finding that they end up, when they go into CDX to request a security key, they get an error message. And that's typically, again, because they've requested both. And so we're going to, ask you if you could, to just as a temporary fix, just be aware that one person can go ahead and request the key, and then the other person can request the ET3 model participant role. So I just wanted to point that out. It's a very important thing that we're finding. In terms of your support, again, we've got support out here. I believe the frequent asked questions should be posted to the ET3 Connect site. So you can go there, as well as the data submission guide, and the standard help desk support is here as well. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and pause there, and any questions that you have or comments, feel free.
John, when you guys move to accepting 3.5, is the intention to accept 3.4 and 3.5 simultaneously?
Yeah, I think that's the intention, and I shouldn't say I think that's the intention. That is the intention. So yeah, we're going to be supporting both 3.4 and 3.5 for the period of time that we need to. So yes, it'll be both.
Sure.
Hey, John, this is Samantha. The last time I was in the portal, it still said like 60 days for the API key. When you get to 180 days, will that automatically reflect there?
Yeah, it will. And
Okay.
yeah. So we just got the word this week from the security folks that we can just plow ahead. And so yeah, the code is being changed as we speak. And yeah, those communications will be updated as well and be reflected.
Okay, and will that 180 days apply to the keys that are already requested, or will it only be for keys going forward?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in, let me just bring back that slide again. There's about less than 10 keys here that expire this month here. And so we're probably going to have to ask that those 10, less than 10 actually, that we go ahead and get those renewed. I'm trying to see if there's a way to renew them without having the individual come in and actually do it through the interface. And so if we can, lessen the burden on you guys to renew those keys, that would be great. So stay tuned. Let me see if I can get that worked out. But yeah, for now, those active keys that you have here, the 27, yeah, we're trying to make it such that you don't have to renew those. And once the change goes into effect, it'll be affected. It'll basically be, grandfathered in on those 27 that are currently in production.
Excellent, thank you.
Yep.
Hi, John. This is Kelly from Image Trend. I've had some clients ask for the documentation of receiving all the patient information, the identifiables. Do you have an update on that piece by chance?
Yeah, Ms. Clark, this is Lieutenant Milan. If you could go ahead and send me an email, I'll provide that documentation to you. We do have that, and I've been trying to track down all the different agencies that have requested it and sent that out to them, but I've definitely got some gaps in terms of which agencies have it. So if you don't mind, please shoot me an email and I'll provide that documentation to you and, provide the file, I guess, if that's easiest for you to the agencies, or if you prefer, just give me the POCs for those agencies and I can send it directly to them so it's coming from CMS. Either way is perfectly amenable to us.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions we have?
John, there's a question in the chat for ET3 services utilizing telehealth under the pilot as the destination facility. Are they supposed to use the facility code associated with the provider, or have states create a new destination code for the telehealth visits?
That's a good question. Neil, what do you think on that one? Do you have any?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have any awareness of what the states have done, because correct me if I'm wrong, but the states are the ones who create the facility code list. And I know part of the problem has been that some of the facilities, they kind of have overlapping codes based on what the state codes it as well as what the federal designations are. Ma'am, if you wouldn't mind sending me an email with a particular state that you have in mind, I think that's the best way to address it, because I don't have awareness on all the states and what they've done with reconciling those codes and approaches. but happy to work with you and figure out what they've done and whether or not there's something that we need from the ET3 team to help get the code straightened out. Okay, see from Wisconsin. Okay, I'm trying to remember. I apologize, ma'am. I don't remember your name off the top of my head. So if you could shoot me an email as well, perhaps include John on this, and we'll make sure to work with you on that and see what's going on with Wisconsin. I know I've had questions about that, for example, from Texas and from Maryland. I think those ones we've addressed, but some of the other states I don't know of. And
this is Josh. Just for your information, Emma is the state data manager for Wisconsin. So she would be the one responsible for making that decision for Wisconsin. We've talked with states. Yeah, we've talked with states about the idea that, you know, a lot of states pretty tightly manage their destination code list. And if they do, they may want to issue codes for these new partners that EMS agencies will be working with for telehealth. So that is a kind of an option that's open to the states. Some states don't manage those lists quite so tightly and may allow the agencies to just come up with their own codes for those healthcare partners.
Yeah, and sorry, this is Emma. I was having trouble getting off mute. From our perspective, we do manage those lists pretty tightly, but I also just was trying to figure out if this has downstream ramifications for the data that CMS is collecting when we're making that decision. So I didn't want to, you know, make a unilateral decision as a state and have that mess up the national data.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk with you to see what you have with how you're setting up the list. I think our concern has actually been messing up what the states have, because I think we'll be fine on our end from ET3, you know, with the various lists that you keep for the facility codes, with the way we've designed some of the elements and the customizations. But yeah, happy to work with you as well too, and just make sure that it also meets your needs. And then if I see no other questions, I have 2 items as well for the vendors for the next couple minutes. I sent out an email on Monday to all the vendors that I was tracking have already started working with participants that are supporting ET3 participants. And specifically, I was asking for points of contact, preferred email addresses for the creation of an ET3 listserv that is pertinent to vendors. It'll primarily be a mirror of what is being sent to the participating EMS agencies, but there will also be some more technical announcements that go out through there, such as production outages on CDX and whatnot. We don't expect more than maybe a couple of emails a month, but just we wanted to have that channel to send out information to vendors. So I'll quickly read off the vendors that I have contact from and confirm from, and then I'll read out the vendors I do not have confirmed from, even though I've worked with you all. Just want to make sure there's the correct address. And then again, if there's a vendor there and I'm not aware that you've already started working with an ET3 participant, definitely shoot me an email as well, and we'll make sure to get your email address. So the vendors I do have preferred email contacts for are AngelTrack, ESO, GMR, Stryker, and Water. The ones I know I need to get but haven't gotten it confirmed yet are ImageTrend and the different POCs in Zoll. So that's what I'm missing. If you're a vendor and you're supporting an ET3 participant and I didn't read off your name on here, please shoot me an email and let me know. It'll also just be a good chance to confirm where we're at, since we're working off of the submission data from 2020 and the vendor agency relationships. The second item I just want to add is a huge thank you to this community. I think we're pushing on about a year, maybe next month, that we first engaged the larger vendor community on this work and making sure that the system that we're building in CMS worked well. I know we've had some recent conversations on these implementation calls for interoperability, and just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that, you know, we've actually done this for ET3. You know, the NEMSIS standard is completely foreign to CMMI, probably CMS wide when it comes to receiving the data. So I think we accomplished a great feat, and, you know, this has only been about a year. A lot of it was us conforming to your standard that you've built, but nonetheless, you've done quite a bit to really help us along the way, and we're really excited about where this is headed. So thank you.
Any other questions for John or Neil? All right, we'll go on to the next item on the agenda, and that's the V334 data acceptance sunset. I'm going to pull up the timeline on the website. And we've had some questions just about whether or not we anticipate the timeline to change again. And the answer to that is no, we do not anticipate any of these times to change again. 334, NHTSA will stop accepting data for 334 August of this year. And then 340, that will be January of 2023. So that's still another couple of years out. And this is the versioning schedule, duration between releases, other timeline information is all available on the website as well. So we still have a handful of states that are submitting in 334, and we're happy to help any way that we can in transitioning your state into 3.5. So just reach out, let us know what we can do to support that. The next item on the agenda is V3.5 transition plans for states and vendors. So we've received a lot of requests from both states and vendors concerning when stakeholders are planning to transition to 3.5. Monet has reached out to all of the states to gather information concerning their timelines, and that will be shared on the NHTSA website under each state. We'd also like to encourage vendors to continue communicating with their states in which they operate on their plans to have 3.5 products available and in use. As vendors test for 3.5 compliance, they are listed on the compliant software testing status page on the website. That's here under technical resources, compliant software testing status. And you can select the option here for 3.5. And this will show you the software products that have completed 3.5 testing and that are seeking, that are in the process of testing for 3.5. So that's on the website for states or agencies that are interested in vendors that are working through that 3.5 compliance process. Any questions on either of those issues? All right. Josh, I'm going to turn it over to you. You've got the next two items on the agenda.
Okay, thanks, Julianne.
All right,
there's a new product available on the NHTSA website, which is the National Schematron Library. It works pretty similarly to the National Custom Element Library in that it gives you a single place where you can view and explore all of the Schematron rules at the national level, as well as all the Schematron rules that have been implemented by states. So let me get my screen sharing on and I'll show you what that looks like. To get to the National Schematron Library, you can visit either the Schematron page under Technical Resources, where you'll find it towards the bottom of that page, or this new link here, which is the one I'm on right now, the National Schematron Library. So let's browse the National Schematron Library and kind of see what it looks like. The first time you visit the library, it may take about 10 seconds to load up all the Schematron rules from the various states, as well as the national rules and the ones from the ET3 project. Once that's ready to go, then there's several ways that you can explore the Schematron rules. You could explore those that are related to demographic data versus those that are for patient care reports. You could look at all that are warnings, errors, or fatals. You can also explore the rules by a NHTSA element that they're related to. This particular element list is the NHTSA 3.5 list. So for example, in e-disposition, you're going to see the new disposition elements that replaced e-disposition.12. And in fact, you'll see that we only have national rules for 3.5 right now. We don't have any states yet that have created 3.5 rules. However, if there's say a NHTSA 3.4 element that you want to search on, you can also just type elements right here in the box, if I can spell correctly, e-disposition.12, and it'll search just as well that way to bring up all the rules related to that data element. You'll see there's lots of them from various states. One thing that, you could also browse by state. So, we'll choose Alaska. Here's all the rules that Alaska uses. You'll see that, for example, some of these rules, Alaska uses this rule, and a bunch of other states have a rule that's worded exactly the same way as how Alaska worded their rule. You can get all the national rules through that one, or the rules for the ET3 project. Those are available in this library as well. This will allow also some interesting analysis for improvements. For example, we can find all of the rules related to eRecord.01, and you'll see that there are a bunch of states that have some rule that says that patient care report number is mandatory. These rules don't need to be in a Schematron file, and they will never fire because the XSD enforces that constraint already. So these rules are essentially unnecessary. So that sort of analysis is also possible so that we can identify ways to improve the validation rules that are in place at the state levels. So that's the National Schematron Library. Any questions or discussions on that?
Hey, Josh, I think the reason some states, this is Ann in Arizona, I think the reason some states have those state Schematron mandatory rules is because, at least in our state and a lot of other states, have agencies that use our system as an enterprise system. So the rules have to be there so that they have it show up on their EPCR that they're required to fill it out so they don't fail to go to NHTSA on export.
Right, yeah. For some states that use ImageTrend as their state software vendor, they can set up rules internal to the ImageTrend system that get exported into Schematron format. In your setup pages for those rules, there's a checkbox for whether or not you want it to be included in the Schematron file that it generates. So you can just clear that checkbox.
And I can't type fast enough to put this in the chat, but can you open one of those larger rules? I just kind of wanted to see what if someone wanted to look at it, because I'm always interested in what other states are doing, and maybe they have found a way to do something I couldn't figure out. If there's the logic, the behind it.
Oh, looking into the details of the rules?
Yes.
The Schematron library will just give you this high-level overview, just what the rule says, and that's it. So if you want to look into the details, then you'll need to go to the Schematron documentation from that particular state and start to dive into the code behind that Schematron rule.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's see. Jennifer Correa said, is there a document with the Schematron library information, or is it only electronic? Oh yeah, this is only electronic. But I guess if you wanted to, you could click on EMS dataset, for example. And this takes a second to come up because there's 6,000 rules. And then at that point, I think we could hit Control P on our keyboard and print out a list of rules. You could also, if you wanted to, you could probably copy and paste these into Excel. So that might be a couple of options there. Is that what you were asking, Jennifer? Any other questions or comments on the Schematron library? Okay, great. Well, feel free to check it out and explore it. I have another agenda item, which is the NHTSA defined lists structure. So I'm going to switch over to that. You'll recall back in the fall, we had a couple discussions on the V3 implementation call about standardizing the layout of the suggested lists, which are coming to be called defined lists that NHTSA publishes for things like EMS procedures and EMS medications, primary impressions, symptom, et cetera. And so at that time, we talked about a document structure for those defined lists that would be provide a consistent computer readable format that vendors would be able to parse on a regular basis, kind of work into their automation workflows. We presented a layout at that time a couple months ago, or a few months ago, really before the end of the year. One of the pieces, the main piece of feedback was we used a lot of attributes, and the preference was to use lean more toward elements than attributes in the structure of that document. So we've made changes accordingly. There's still some things that are modeled as attributes in this proposal, because that tends to be how those things are modeled in the core NHTSA standard as well. Things like date stamps or code types. Otherwise, it's more of an element structure. I'll scroll down to the sample XML here so you can look at that. So this is what the document structure is currently looking like in XML format. So for example, here in all these codes, you're going to have this block repeating for every code in the file. So for the medications list, you're going to have about 100 or so of these. Same thing for procedures, and you'll see the value, the category, the label, the suggested label for EMS use, etc. We're also modeling it in JSON format. And so this is what the JSON layout would look like. We're going to disseminate this draft document through the Google Groups list, and would love to get any additional feedback that all of you might have before we go ahead and finalize the proposal and build an XSD and a JSON schema and get those out for your review. So I'd be happy to take any feedback at this time. And then also, as I said, you'll have a chance to get this through email and review it and share it with developers and so on. Any initial comments from what I've shared today? Okay, Doug Butler asking if NHTSA will still accept values that are not on the defined lists, and the answer to that is yes. Okay, well, if no other comments, look forward to receiving this in your email in the next day or two. And that wraps it up for me. Julianne, back to you.
All right, thank you, Josh. So at this time, we don't have any items from the Office of EMS, but we'll open it to questions, comments, concerns from any of our stakeholders that would be appropriate for this large group of experts.
This is Anne in Arizona. I had a question, and maybe other states have figured this out and I just haven't, but so there is, back when we kind of were starting to do in V3, the Schematron distribution thing, there was kind of a confusion as to how that was created. And then I went to NHTSA, and then I came back, and then we sent it, all that. And we've got that figured out. What I've noticed for at least my own state is when I do an updated Schematron, I send it to NHTSA, it's posted to the resource repository. Sometimes I send out an email with over the years, I've sent out an email, sometimes announcing it. Sometimes I send out an email with it attached. Sometimes I send to agencies. Sometimes I send to vendors. I know Monet sends out a weekly email saying what states have updated resources. And I just find that inevitably there's an agency or two who has stuff failing because they never applied the Schematron. I know there's various ways vendors do it. A couple vendors have the agencies do it themselves. Some vendors post it to a library. Some vendors do each individual agency. I'm sure there's other methods, but I kind of am getting to the point that it's difficult to send it out 6 different ways. And I wanted to find out if there was kind of one process that either could be defined. I love those little flowcharts with the arrows, but just so that states know, hey, when you post a new schematron to the repository, it's posted and vendors will get it to their agencies or apply it, or do we need to do more? And, or is it by vendor?
Hey, Ann, this is Brian in Virginia. You actually piggybacked on the one topic I was going to bring up as well. We had a new Schematron file go into effect on the 15th, and I was actually going to ask all the vendors to follow up with their customers that they had in Virginia just to make sure that they got it applied, because on the 16th, we noticed about 2,000 or 3,000 failures, and we've slowly been getting out to the agencies and their vendors. And as much communication as we sent out starting in December, there's still people that missed it. So I'd be interested too to see if anybody has a better method of getting communication out, because I'm emailing the agencies, I'm emailing the vendors, I'm trying to do it, 2 months, 3 months in advance, then a month in advance, and we still miss. There's just I haven't come up with a good way to make sure everybody is on board with the same timeline.
And I'm going to add a detail. This is Ann again to Brian's. So in Arizona, we send out a new schematron sometimes every month because we do control our destination list really closely, and so every time we add destinations, we need a new schematron. So yeah, I agree.
Could you repeat that, Anne? You were really garbled.
Sorry, I moved my laptop into the kitchen to make a cup of coffee. So we, in Arizona, and I don't know how many other states, I suppose I could look if I looked at Monet's emails and checked, that we send out a new schematron, maybe not every month, but about every month, maybe every 2 months, because we do add, as someone mentioned before, we control our destinations fairly closely. And so they have to be a matching code. So every time we add a new acute care facility or whatever, we need to update our schematron. And so we don't even have I need to do this on a monthly basis, and it seems very discombobulated, or I'm just confused, which is completely possible.
Do any of the other states or vendors have suggestions or things that have worked for them in the past? Dipti from Patel also says in the chat that they're having the same issues in Georgia as well.
And this is Josh. I know that Michigan put out an updated schematron rule set in May of last year. And when they eventually enforced those new rules in their state system in September, which is 4 months later, they had a bunch of failures for the first few weeks, which means that those rules had still not been deployed at the local level by the time they issued those rules, by the time they updated in the state system.
Hi, Ann. This is Kelly from Image Trend. I worked really closely with Peter Brody on a very big update to his Schematron, and I think he did a really good job of communicating. And one of the things that I think worked really well for him and making sure that all his agencies updated was he hosted several go-to webinars, and he presented them to his agencies. He had a list of people that he could track to make sure they attended. He also explained the changes that were happening. So one of the things that I think might help is to make sure that you're scheduling that out, tracking to make sure that your agencies are attending. And from my experience with Peter, it worked really well. And I believe all the New York agencies moved over for the most part. Of course, there's always going to be stragglers, but I do think that worked really well for Peter. And that is something that I was able to help him with as well. So if that's something that you're interested in, I'm happy to help coordinate that same thing that we did for Peter in New York, just to make sure that those schematrons are being coordinated.
I don't, because we have so many different vendors in Arizona, and I have some states, they're far more than we do. Yeah. I can't imagine having I don't even know how some vendors expect this to be communicated, how they apply it if they do it themselves. I know Image Trend does the library. Like, kind of gets to the point that I think they should be standardized at the NHTSA level in some way. I'm not saying vendors can't do it their own way, but kind of like you need to put a watch on the repository and communicate with your clients. I can send out an email to everybody I have in my email system, and I can send out an email to the vendors, which I usually do. Say, hey, there's a new Schematron in the repository, and Monet does it every month. But it seems like if we're going to continue with Schematrons in the future versions, which it sounds like there's no plan to stop that, there kind of should be some specified route that someone else down the road can refer to on how to do this without kind of doing it 7 different ways, or even having to host a bunch of webinars for just one vendor's customers. I want to be helpful, but I also think that could be a huge burden. I think we have 7 or 8 vendors in our states, and I know some states have way more. So yeah, I don't know if there's gonna be a solution today. I just wanted to point out this is obviously an issue where things aren't getting communicated on a frequent basis. And I feel like this is something we could tighten up.
I guess from our experience, some systems do it with the agencies updating their own schematron as opposed to the vendor doing it, and that's pretty problematic. It's something that they, I think, oh, we'll get to it later, but it's an area of the system they don't touch very often, and yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the solution would be. If you have a list of the, I don't know, frequent offenders, the ones that kind of need the hand holding, that might be something to do, maybe involve their vendor in that process.
I think part of the issue is for us, and maybe I'm not understanding why we are going down this path, but I don't even know if that's the reason a lot of times. Okay. What'll happen is a bunch of failures, and then eventually somebody will be like, I'm trying to send the right code and it's not letting me, but it's so far down the path, and it takes a lot of time sometimes to determine that. And with, we have about 150 agencies reporting, a few more actually, I think if you count air. And yeah, for one person, for myself, I don't think it's something we're always gonna notice. I mean, I can make reports that say why something's failing, and I send it to each agency on a monthly or quarterly basis. But by then it's been, a while by the time we figure it out. And they don't seem to know. Yeah.
I wonder if there's kind of an 80-20 rule with that, though, where 80% of the failures are only 20% of the agencies. So if you could, if you have kind of a cross-reference sheet, say that, these, 10 vendors are 10 agencies are using this one vendor, there's a easy to address issue there. It's might not be as, when you say thousands of PCRs are failing, it may not be that broad of a problem, perhaps.
If we do come up, if there is a standardized process that we work on or that we put out there, I would love there to be a testing period where a state puts out a schematron to the vendors, and we get a week or 2 to go through it, because sometimes there's rules that might present an issue for like legal and compliance, right? We've had lots of conversations about the requirement of race lately and things like that. So is it possible, if we do come up with a standardized process, to put something along those lines in there as well? Because I do know sometimes a state will put out a schematron on Tuesday and say it's effective Wednesday, get it done, and it will cross up something else that we require that may not be a state rule, but it's a agency rule.
Yeah, what I started doing in Virginia, because this is the first schematron we put out in like a year and a half. When the schematron file got created and sent to me, I actually engaged with 2 other vendors that have customers in Virginia, and I actually asked them to run it through their testing process. One of the vendors actually found a problem, and we went back and fixed that problem, and then everybody tested it again for me. The challenge is building in all the time for that, because that was the reason, again, in Virginia, when I first started the process, it went into effect on March 15th. but I literally started on it in November so that everybody would have time to do all the testing. And if I remember correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's a process that's actually going to come out with 3.5 that actually builds in a lot of extra time for things. So, I think all of us are super busy, and trying to get trying to build in all of this time to do things. I mean, I do it because I have to, because I can't afford to put a bad Schematron file out. I've done that before and had to pull it back, but it is a big effort to kind of get all that done.
And I thought Jennifer's idea, this is Anne again. I don't know, those things you got to think about, and you're like, is this going to be a problem? I don't have a problem with that. I would request, if there was a testing period required for the validation rules, which I can see is sensible, that perhaps the Schematrons that are only doing facility updates would not have to wait for that, because then the agencies just have to wait another week or two before they can send in EPCRs with that destination type, if there are no Schematron rule changes in that Schematron. Just an idea.
Hi, Anne. This is Samantha at the ESO, and that was kind of what I was thinking. It would help tremendously if when the state is sending out a new Schematron, that like we kind of have minor updates that are to facility lists that don't impact any rules in how a record is entered and validated. But the things where rules change, especially if they're becoming more restrictive, moving from a warning to a error, or new errors are added or new warnings are added, if there was some kind of time period for that is just required for vendors to go in and make sure that it doesn't, as Jennifer was mentioning, impact other rules that are already in place for an agency.
Yeah, I mean, in Michigan, that's what we did. I sent out a detailed email saying exactly what was changing in the Schematron, what was moving to an error from a warning. And I put out over a 2-month lead time from when that rule went into effect, and we still had a large number of agencies and vendors not implement that rule. And so we were getting thousands of records failing. And we're still having issue with some of our Zoll agencies that self-host their stuff.
I feel like Kevin's point is really good too, because the more, when he said that, all the morning times, and if there was an established process, it could still be a little loose, because there's differences, but I can't imagine those clients were happy, those EMS agencies. I can't imagine the vendors are happy, and I'm sure Kevin wasn't happy. So nobody gains by kind of this ineffectual application of a Schematron. Nobody wants that, I don't think. I do agree sometimes you don't want to apply it because there's, like Jennifer said, issues with the rules, perhaps violating some clinical guidelines. I know I've sent out a Schematron in the past that had like a rule that didn't make sense, and I tested it, but until it was in the real world and out there, I didn't realize that it wasn't doing what it's supposed to. I was just hoping we could kind of find an agreed way to do this. I always put a change log out. Of course, we didn't for this last one. I said that I haven't yet because it's only a couple days out there. But I know Monet sends out in her email a little description, like only, I think it says something like only facility changes or something. Unless you guys, that could be part of the process documents. The states have to, provide the Schematron rules, or I don't know, states might kill me for saying that, or provide a change log with the facility changes, because I just want to have it like one way where we all know this can work this way. And also if I retire or win the lottery, I'm hoping someone can take over and not cause a bunch of pain because they have a document they can kind of read through and can guide them.
Yeah, and this is Josh. I was just looking at the changelog notes for Arizona, and they do just say updates to EMS dataset Schematron file. So yeah, maybe you could work with Monet to ensure that you get a good message put in there that says, for example, that we updated the Schematron file. The only thing that we changed is we added some destination codes to that rule.
Sure, and maybe I wasn't specific in my email. I apologize when I sent it out.
And maybe we could do some formatting changes to the email Monet sends out, where it is, this is, Arizona updated Schematron and like in yellow or something, just facility codes, or, you know, in red, you know, added new rules, something that kind of catches the eye a little bit.
Yeah, those notes come from the commit notes in the repository. So that's the place to fix that. If we get good commit notes going in, then it flows downstream to that weekly email. Someone mentioned an NMSIS API for querying upstream for their Schematron rules. These are all hosted in Git repositories, which vendors can clone and watch. There's also a REST API available to watch for updates as well. So for technical documentation on that API, go to the technical resources menu and then resource repository. Again, that's resource repository. On that page, you'll find the repository guide that walks you through the different ways of interacting with the repositories.
So Josh, do you think, or Julianne, or anyone really, so do you think Anne's suggestion, which I think is a good one, and it might not be able to be set in stone, right? Because there's always going to be some exception or a hot fix or something along those lines. But is it possible to come up with a process that everyone follows that's roughly, at least roughly the same as far as timeframes? And I agree, Anne, if it's just facility codes that are done, that really shouldn't require testing time or anything like that. But is it possible that would be something the TAC would work on, or this group would work on?
I think it's a great idea, and I'm looking at all the ideas in chat and the discussion here. There's clearly a need for some guidance, and whether it's a policy or just best practices, I think we could pull together quite a bit of this discussion and the suggestions and come up with a document and then bring it to this group, or if we want to do a smaller group that can be more focused, or even part of our internal advisory board, where there's such a clear need. I think it's a great idea to pull these together and kind of figure out a good way forward, recommendations, best practices, something along those lines. And thanks everyone for putting suggestions in the chat. We keep all of this, so we'll go through each of these and put them together on a draft and see if we can't come to a good idea on a standardized practice. Does anyone see downstream problems with developing a standard recommendation or a best practice, where it wouldn't be policy, it would just be recommendations?
I was just going to say that not perhaps a problem with that per se, but I'm concerned that we're not actually addressing the problem that is happening. So if the problem is sourced by the agency is not updating their own schematrons, or perhaps they didn't update the version of their software that has the updated schematron, something like that. This wouldn't help that. So I would recommend getting an idea of what the actual problem is, and it very well may be that. But for us, we keep the schematrons updated continuously. But if some other systems may not do that and rely on the agency to do it themselves, some do that. And making sure that we're addressing the actual issues, I would recommend taking a look at that to make sure that this is the way to address it.
It's a really good point.
I agree with that as well. I mean, I remember the days before the Friday email, and so I think that's great. We just update all the ones we get. There is, some of those emails include effective dates that aren't clearly communicated. We go to put it in production and then see that there's a rule that excludes all runs prior to this day or that day or something. So some effective date on that Friday email, and maybe making it a Monday email would be helpful for us, but we're pretty happy with where it is compared to where it used to be. We used to have to go find those various websites for each state and that kind of thing.
And to David's point, I mean, I do have an idea, and it's more than one vendor and more than one agency, but I haven't ever done like an analysis of, because I don't always even know, because sometimes they figure it out and fix it before, resubmit. But, maybe this process that we start with this guidance might, vendors might kind of examine how they're doing it, decide if they want to formalize it a little bit more internally if it's not done in a certain way. I don't know if that won't address the issue. I'm hesitant to advise vendors on how they're supposed to do something. I hope that a process in place so that everyone knows, whether it's Monet's email that notifies them or everyone should do I'm going to get the terminology wrong, a watch on the repository will hopefully lead us to having fewer of these issues. I do agree with David, there probably will always be probably a couple, but I don't also want the problems that Virginia and Michigan just brought up, which I think everyone can agree, if you have several months notice and there's testing, I think that's a fair approach to a state doing a new schematron that has additional schematron rules. And so maybe this document can kind of help us get to an agreement of expectations too from states.
Hey, Julianne, this is Brian in Virginia. One other little piece is making sure that we have good vendor contacts. I mean, I know that that sometimes is a challenge. I mean, because I do try to include the vendors in any notifications that I send out, but sometimes I don't know if those are actually going to the right person or not. So if they're, and my email address is plastered all over the NHTSA site and pretty much, I don't know how many other places in Virginia. So, so just having, so understanding that I'm communicating with the right person at the right, at each one of the vendors would definitely help. I mean, in Virginia, we have 13 different vendors reporting to us. And so I put every email address I've got on there. I just don't know if it ever goes to the right person.
This is Sharon in Nebraska, and our policies that we have developed, we focus on the ambulance services because we do provide a software for every ambulance service in the state if they want to use it. And if they choose to deviate and go to a different type of software, then the responsibility is on that ambulance service because our regulations are written so that we interpreted it that the ambulance services are responsible for getting their records to us. So, because it's pretty much impossible for us to keep up with changes that go in to each software company and who would be the contact person. And if the ambulance service is using a different software, then they would know who they ought to be contacting for updates. So that's kind of how our policies have developed, is putting the main focus on the ambulance services, and they in turn can contact whoever they're working with if they have switched software other than what we provide. And we do the updates on NHTSA, and that seems to have been working pretty well for us since they started doing that also. So that's the input that I have at this point anyways.
Thanks, Sharon. A lot of really good discussion, suggestions, ideas, really helpful. And has this discussion been helpful to your question? I think there's a lot more that needs to go into this. But is there anything else you'd want to add to that, to the talk around this?
No, I think this has been great. And it brought up quite a few things I hadn't even thought of, like the testing period. And I just thought too, like, I know I've sent out emails to my little vendor list, which just like Brian says, sometimes I get these return, this person isn't there, and I don't even know who to I can't find somebody then. Sometimes I have to call agencies and ask them who their salesperson is. And I think it's also Jennifer's note kind of on how, like, if we send out just new facilities, then it wouldn't need a testing period if we send out new Schematron rules. I know in the past when I have made mistakes on Schematron rules, or maybe I've just updated it so there's something allowed that hadn't been before, I would usually put in the email something like, even though there's new Schematron rules, these ones are basically eliminating certain issues. They weren't anything where that might still need to go through a testing period, but it just kind of has got me thinking. And I really appreciate that everyone's receptive to this idea and didn't think it was like annoying, because it's something that's been bothering me. And as Brian said, we're all so busy right now. I find my time to dig in and deal with some of these standard things that come up occasionally, it slips through a lot longer than it should. And so I want to say thank you to everybody for considering this idea.
Thank you for bringing it up, Anne. Ridgely brings up another question in the chat that we'll hit really quick. Is there any objection to a contact list for vendors that the states can use? I know we had attempted to do this a while back, but there was some reservation on where it would be posted or who it would be shared with. Since we're looking for vendor contacts that aren't necessarily just the sales office or the office for questions. Do vendors see any issue with creating a contact list that would just be shared with the states? Yeah, and to piggyback on Amber, it doesn't have to be public, just something that was not posted to the site, but just sent to states.
So this is Emma from Wisconsin. I just want to chime in real quick because in the last 6 months, I've gone through the process of identifying vendor contacts that are appropriate for these updates. And it seems like, from my memory, at least some vendors, the contacts are different depending on like what state and what region you're in. So I think that could be something that complicates it a little bit. But I'll let the vendor speak to that more.
I don't really have a problem with it. How do we handle the updates to that, though?
That would be, yeah, if it's not public or maintained, we just have to put it on some type of schedule for regular updates.
Yes, we at Georgia, every year I send out an email to all of our vendors because I know in the beginning of the year, there's always personnel changes. So for my current vendors contact that I have, I usually send them an email confirming their primary and secondary contact person and just update it as I go through my email notification list for them. So I usually do it every year. But I can share that email with the other data managers if that's helpful, but it is private. I mean, I haven't published it anywhere, so I don't know if sending it to all the data managers will help that. But again, it could be a different person designated to a different state, so I'm not sure how that will work out from the vendor's perspective.
Great suggestions. You've given us lots to think about, lots to work on. John, thanks for your comment also back on the Schematron discussion, putting the distribution into the web service. And we'll take all these fantastic ideas and review them and pull together some notes on this. Are there any other questions? I don't want to shut this conversation down if it's still being valuable. I think we've got a good direction forward. But if there's any other questions, concerns, comments, we're happy to take those. On the agenda, you can see the list for the next few implementation calls coming up, but there's also the reminder that we've got save the date for boot camp. And boot camp this year will be a little bit different than in the past. In the past, we've designed it to be for new or learning state managers, state data managers. This year, it will be totally geared towards 3.5 transition. So any states, state data managers that are preparing, planning, going through, thinking about, considering transitioning to 3.5, this boot camp will be really valuable for you. And then the annual meeting will be the same format that we did last year. Both boot camp and annual meeting will be virtual. Annual meeting will be August 3rd through 5th, 3 half days like we did last year. And those times will be coming out along with a calendar invite for you to put that on your calendars and set that time aside. And then, of course, for the annual meeting, if there are topics that you specifically want to make sure get covered, please share those with us. We're building out that agenda and have a lot already on it, but we're happy to make sure that those agendas are meaningful and topics that need to be addressed with this group. So I think we're good for today. It was a great discussion. I really appreciate your willingness to talk and give feedback and bring up your issues. That makes these meetings really beneficial for everybody. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you again in a couple of weeks for the April 14th B3 implementation call. And I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.